Hi, James. Regarding your retire on videos, how do you suggest to deal with the sequence of return risks once you are retired? You are suggesting to retire on very volatile assets like Bitcoin or Tesla in order to generate enough returns. But this amount of volatility can become a devastating threat once you are retired and start living off your nest egg. If a bear market hits you early on, that's why regular financial advisors suggest very low volatility portfolio in retirement, but these portfolios won't yield enough returns, especially when looking for a very long retirement period. Thanks in advance. So I always say if you're not making 14% on your portfolio, you're drowning, you're not treading water. And therefore, your low volatility portfolio will not get you to the finish line. But the reason I do this is a lot of people are not prepared to get to the finish line. So sometimes when you're not in a certain situation, you do need to take on a little bit more risk. But once you get to the finish line, then you de-risk. And this is called the 3 buckets. Think in 3 buckets. As you know, I love things in threes. But you use time, you lose your dynamic withdrawals, and your cash flow buffers. So you can live off that volatility, but in a very risk-controlled way. So an example, imagine you got $1 million, and that is your nest egg, your portfolio. Bucket 1 would be 20%. And here in this 20%, you would allocate your, you'd have enough to cover 5 years of expenses. This would be ultra low risk, asset preservation. It could be things like STRC that gives you 10% return, etc. That's bucket 1. Bucket 2, your balance would be 30%, about 300K. This would be moderate growth. It could be S&P 500 ETF or NASDAQ ETF or something like that. Some volatility, but income oriented as well if you want. And your bucket 3 would be your growth, about half, 50%. It's up to you and your risk profile. That's your long-term engine with high upside assets. For example, Bitcoin, Tesla, disruption. We don't know what those assets are going to look like in 5 years. I always say keep your tap dancing shoes on, but this is where you chase returns, but it's hands off, so you can deal with volatility. You don't have to dip into it every 2 or 3 years. It'll be left for maybe 5 years plus, maybe 10 years even in some cases, or held forever. And that is the key. So again, once you get to the finish line, you start spreading across the 3 buckets. Very important. Great question.